When the Legends Die, Chapter 21. Drowsy Bayfield had its Saturday afternoon crowd. A dozen saddle horses were hitched at the long rack in front of the general store, and wagon teams with a few saddle horses were in the cottonwood grove at the end of the street. The two saloons spilled loud talk and laughter onto the board sidewalk. Cowhands loafed in the doorways and at the edge of the walk. They glanced up as Albert Left Hand drove up the dusty street and stopped his team in front of the big store. Thomas sat in the wagon, holding the reins, while Albert went in and talked with the trader. He made his deal, then came out with and ordered, "Go around back and unload." Thomas drove the team up to the corner and around the back, down the alley to an open shed where Albert Left Hand was waiting. Thomas unloaded the stinking pelts and piled them as Albert Left Hand directed. Then Albert Left Hand gave him a nickel. "For the pop," he said. He took charge of the team, and Thomas went back the way he had come to the main street. He didn't know where to get the pop. Looking, he came to the saddlery shop. In the window was the most beautiful saddle he had ever seen, ornately tooled and polished till it shone. He stared at it, admiring with all his heart. Then he saw the bridle hanging from the saddle horn. It was black and white horsehair bridle with long, round braided reins. He recognized that bridle. It was the bridle he had made, with a pattern he had thought up. It had a price tag, $5. He gasped. $5. He hadn't got anything for it because it was work he was assigned to do, schoolwork, and when it was sold to a trader, the money went to pay for his keep. He stared at the bridle and the price tag, and his eyes returned to the saddle. There was no price tag on the saddle. It cost too much to say, he decided. But if the bridle was worth $5, and if he could make bridles and sell them, then someday he could buy that saddle. He didn't have a pony for the saddle, but someday he could buy a pony too. He was still there in front of the window, staring at the saddle, when two cowhands came out of the nearest saloon. They talked loud and laughed. They saw the boy, and the tall, slim one jabbed a thumb into Thomas's ribs and demanded, "What's your name?" Thomas stepped back and tried to hurry away, but the cowhand caught his arm. "I asked you what's your name." "Thomas." "All right, Tom. Want to earn a quarter?" He winked at his dark-haired companion. Thomas didn't answer. "Know how to ride a horse?" the cowhand asked. "Sure you do. All Indian kids do." He drew a quarter from his pocket. "Look, Tom, you go get my horse and ride it back here, and I'll give you this quarter." Tom stared at the quarter. He had never owned a quarter. This man was offering him a quarter just to ride a horse. He looked at the cowhand again, wide-eyed, and started to leave. The cowhand caught his arm again. "Just a minute. Get the right horse or you don't get the quarter. The black gelding with the one-ear bridle and a red and white saddle blanket. He's hitched right down there in the cottonwoods." Again Thomas started to leave, and again the cowhand caught his arm. "Ride him. Don't try to lead him, understand? He don't lead very well." His companion laughed. Free at last, Thomas hurried down the street. He found the horse, hitched by a neck rope. It was so skittish he had to drive it around the tree until the rope was wound tight. Then he snubbed the reins to the saddle horn, untied the rope, got his foot in the stirrup. The horse danced away, but he swung into the saddle as it began buck jumping. With the reins snubbed, it couldn't get its head down, but it buck jumped in a circle among the trees before he knew he could ride it. Knew he had its rhythm and his own balance. Then he gave it a little slack in the reins, and it bucked viciously a time or two before he got it headed up the street. Still holding its head high in the snubbed reins, he rode it to the waiting cowhands. He got off and handed the reins to the one who had sent him on the errand. The cowhand growled. "You snubbed the reins. You didn't let 'em buck." His companion laughed. "He brought the horse, didn't he? He rode him. Pay up, Slim. And let's see you ride him." Slim gave the quarter to Tom. A little knot of men had gathered, and someone asked what was going on. The short, dark-haired cowhand grinned. "Slim sent the kid to bring his horse. Now Slim's going to ride him unless he's afraid to." Slim laughed. "I can ride anything with hair and 4 legs." "Well, prove it, man. Get in the saddle and prove it." Slim shortened the reins in his left hand, caught the saddle horn, and reached for the rear stirrup. The horse shied, tossed its head, got slack in the reins. Slim swung into the saddle, but before he hit the seat, the horse ducked its head and began to buck. Slim couldn't find the other stirrup. He didn't have a chance. 3 jumps and he was loose. The 4th jump sent him sprawling. Someone caught the horse and brought it back. Slim got to his feet, cursing, dusted himself, and picked up his hat. He limped back to the sidewalk. His companion, laughing, asked, "Want another try, or shall I put the boy on again?" "Go to hell." The dark-haired one turned to Thomas. "I'll give you $1 if you ride that horse again without snubbing the reins." Thomas hesitated, but he had ridden the horse once, knew its rhythm, and it had worked off some of its meanness. $1, a whole $1. He took the reins, gave them one turn around his left hand, and reached for the saddle horn. He got his left foot in the stirrup and swung up as the horse shied around. He found the other stirrup and held the horse's head up for one jump while he settled himself. Then he tightened his knees beneath the pommel, let the horse have slack in the reins, and rode with the buck. The horse came down stiff-legged and went into a twisting, jolting series of bucks. He rode as he had ridden the unbroken ponies on the sagebrush flats. The horse eased for a moment, then bucked and side-lunged halfway up the block. He kept his seat, and it began to subside. Then he put it into a stiff-legged trot. It tossed its head and wanted to run, but he held it in and rode to the end of the block, then turned and came back in a series of short, jolting jumps. Thomas got off and handed the reins to the dark-haired cowhand, who gave him a silver $1. Then, both proud of himself and embarrassed, he squirmed through the crowd to get away. At the edge of the crowd, a wiry, red-haired man in Levi's and worn fancy-stretched boots stopped him. "You're quite a rider, son," he said. He had a crooked nose and a week's growth of rusty beard. "What's your name?" "Thomas." The man sized him up. "How old are you?" "14, I guess." "From the reservation?" "Yes." Thomas wanted to get away from the crowd. The red-haired man did too. They edged down the street together. "How'd you like to learn to be a real bronc twister?" Thomas hesitated. "I'll teach you. How about working for me?" "I haven't got a permit." "Your pa in town?" "My father is dead. I'm with Albert Left Hand. I help him with the sheep." "The fat old man who stinks of sheep? The one in the cafe?" The man grinned. "A boy like you herding sheep. It's time you and me got together. I've got a place down in New Mexico, the other side of the reservation. I've got a whole string of bad horses that you can ride." He laughed. "You just throw in with Red Dillon and we'll both go places." "I haven't got a permit," Thomas said again. The man winked. "I'll tend to the permit. The agency's right on our way. You got a pony?" "No." "I've got a spare. How'd you get to town? Walk?" "I came in the wagon with Albert Left Hand. I have to tell him." "Come on, I'll tell him." They went to the cafe. Albert Left Hand was alone at the far end of the counter. Nobody wanted to sit near him because of the way he smelled. Red Dillon went to Albert and said he had hired the boy and was taking Thomas home with him. Albert Left Hand didn't even look up. He took another big bite of raisin pie, chewed for a moment, then growled, "Boys come, boys go. That one's no good." Red Dillon grinned, and they turned away. "We ought to eat before we go," he said to Thomas. "Me giving you a job, you ought to treat. Money's no good in your pocket." So they found stools at the near end of the counter, well away from Albert Left Hand, and Red Dillon ordered chili and coffee for both of them. Then they had donuts and more coffee, making an even $1's worth. Thomas gave Red his $1, and Red paid the man at the end of the counter. Red's horses were on the far side of the cottonwood grove at the end of the street. Both were saddled, but the saddle on the black had no horn, and a tarp covered the bedroll that was lashed across. Red tightened the cinches and tied the bedroll back of the saddle. He saw Thomas puzzling. "Never see a saddle like this?" he asked. "This here's a bronc saddle for rodeoing. If a bronc comes over backwards on to you, there's no horn to punch a hole in your guts. If you get throwed frontwards by a mean bucker, there's no horn to hang you up by your chap strings. That's why the horn's sawed off. You're going to see a lot of this saddle, Tom." He swung into the saddle on the sorrel, a conventional saddle with a horn. "Let's go. Let's get that permit and head for my place." Tom mounted the black and settled himself in the bronc saddle. They headed down the road south toward the agency.